As I as I sit down to record this episode, I can't help but feel the weight of the date. This week marks the 1 year since Eryn passed away. Man, a full year. In some ways, it feels like yesterday. The shock, the numbness, the disbelief. And in other ways, it feels like a lifetime ago because so much has changed since then. When I started walking through the stages of grief on this podcast, I didn't plan it around the calendar. But here we are, talking about acceptance on the 1 year anniversary of losing my wife. That's not an accident. Acceptance is a word people throw around easily, but living it out is hard. For me, it hasn't been about saying, I'm okay with what happened. I'm not okay with it. I'm not okay with it. I never will be. Instead, acceptance has been about learning to live with the reality of the loss, to take a step forward while still honoring her memory, and to begin noticing that life can grow in the broken places. There have been moments where acceptance snuck up on me, like like the first time that I laughed without guilt, or the day that I made a decision for my future without feeling like I was betraying the past. Or even just walking into an empty house and realizing the silence didn't crush me the way that it once did. Acceptance doesn't mean that the pain is gone. It means that I've stopped fighting reality and I've started making peace with it. And from that place, God has been meeting me in powerful ways. So today, on this 1 year mark, I want to talk about what acceptance looks like in grief, how it shows up in our minds, in our bodies, and in our spirits, and how it can actually be a turning point, not the end of grief, but the beginning of healing. Before we dive back in, I want to share something that's really close to my heart. When I lost my wife, I didn't always have the words to pray. Some days the weight of grief was so heavy, all I could do was sit in silence. It's out of that season that I wrote 7 prayers for the grieving heart. These prayers are simple, honest, and born out of real pain and real hope. And I want to give them to you absolutely free. Just go to whitmancollective.com/grief to download your copy. If you're walking through loss right now, or if you know someone who is, my prayer is that these words will remind you you're not alone, and God is near to the brokenhearted. Go to whitmancollective.com/grief and download your copy today. Welcome to Rooted for Growth, a podcast about digging beneath the surface to cultivate a life of faith, resilience, and purpose. I'm your host, Troy Whitman, and I'm grateful that you're here with me today. Over the last several weeks, we've been walking through the stages of grief together. Back in episode 16, we started with the stage of denial. Then in episode 17, we talked about anger in the Turning Anger into Growth episode. Episode 18 walked us through bargaining with the weight of what ifs. And last week in episode 19, it took us into depression with how to identify depression. This week, we arrive at the final stage in the 5 stages of grief, acceptance. And for me, this isn't just a teaching topic. It's a personal one that I continue to walk through every day. Acceptance is something I've been slowly learning over the past year, and it's fitting that today, on the 1-year anniversary of Eryn's passing, we talk about what it really means to reach this stage. Now, this stage is not closure, but it's a way to begin moving forward in hope. Let's look at the psychological lens of what happens in the body when we reach a stage of acceptance. When we talk about acceptance, it's easy to think of that as kind of a mental shift, just changing how you think. But acceptance actually shows up in the body too. When we first experience grief, our bodies go into a survival mode. Stress hormones like cortisol flood our system. The heart races, our breathing gets shallow, sleep becomes restless. The body is bracing for impact. It's stuck in a fight, flight, or freeze mode. But when acceptance begins to take root, something changes physically. The stress starts to calm. The nervous system moves out of constant hypervigilance mode and into balance. The parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of us that allows rest and digestion, it starts to switch back on. You start noticing your shoulders aren't always tense and your breathing becomes easier. And maybe, just maybe, you can sleep a little bit deeper. I remember noticing this shift for the first time. I took a deep breath and realized I wasn't holding it without knowing. My body had been braced for weeks, like waiting for a blow that had honestly already landed. Acceptance didn't mean that the grief was gone, but my body finally stopped bracing against what was already true. Brain research even shows that acceptance activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that helps us think clearly and make decisions, while it also decreases the overactivity of the amygdala, or our fear center. In simple terms, acceptance helps the brain shift from constant alarm to clarity. And that's the power of acceptance. It doesn't erase grief, but it changes how our bodies and our minds carry it. It's like carrying a heavy backpack. At first, you fight against it, your body aches, and every step feels forced. But after a while, you stop fighting the weight. You just adjust your posture, you settle into a rhythm, and while the backpack is still there, you've found a way to carry it without destroying yourself. I mentioned that to a client just this week that grief is never really gone. You just get a little stronger in your ability to carry it. Let's talk about the daily signs of acceptance through our everyday life. Beyond the science, acceptance shows up in everyday life, and it's not dramatic, it's very subtle. For me, acceptance was starting to notice that I could sit at the dinner table without staring at her chair the entire time. Or when I would start making plans for the weekend without the instinct to check with her first. Those moments were still painful, but they didn't crush me like they once had. For someone else, it might be being able to laugh at a memory instead of only crying about it, or visiting a gravesite without feeling like you have to collapse in tears. These little signs of acceptance matter because they remind us that grief and life can coexist. You can carry sorrow and still experience joy. You can honor the past and still look forward to the future. Acceptance is learning to say, this is part of me now, but it doesn't define all of me. I think about those who've rebuilt their lives after tragedy. Parents who start a foundation in their child's name, or widows who find companionship again, or those who turn their pain into a calling to help others. None of them stopped grieving, but they stopped letting grief be the only story. I remember when Eryn passed away, it was in October. And the first holiday that came up was Thanksgiving here in the United States. And I remember as my father in law and my mother in law and Erin's aunt and uncle wanted to have Thanksgiving, and they just wanted me and Natalie to show up. Didn't have to bring anything, just to come. And I remember going, and it was different. It was still full of love and still, still had the people there that we wanted to be around. It was just different, and it was sad thinking about it because it marked a new way of celebrating a holiday. The holidays are very hard because they're different. In a way, I'm kind of happy, if happy's the right word, of when Erin's passing took place, because shortly after that was Thanksgiving, and shortly after that was Christmas, and not long after that was my birthday, and then Erin's birthday. So there was like a 4 month, 3.5, 4 month span there where it was just a holiday or some major event that was going on constantly. And it kind of thrust me and Natalie into it. So we had to deal with it. We had to face it. We had to move forward. But I felt even in those moments that God was giving us strength to walk through that. And we found that as we went through that, we could start to accept what was going on around us, accept the reality of where we were. In the Bible, it gives us some powerful pictures of acceptance. Jesus in Gethsemane saying, "Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done," in Luke 22:42. It's not denial, that's acceptance. In Job, he said, "The Lord gave and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Job 1:21. That's the acceptance of God's sovereignty in the midst of devastating loss. David, after his child died, he got up, washed, and went to worship in 2 Samuel 12:20. He had acceptance, and it didn't erase his grief, but it let him keep moving. And then Paul, "Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities than the power of Christ may rest upon me." 2 Corinthians 12:9. 2 Corinthians 12:9. And what do these stories teach us? So we've heard some good examples here. What it's really showing us is that acceptance isn't about giving up. It's about leaning into God's strength when our own strength runs out. When I read these stories, I'm reminded that my story fits into theirs. I'm not the first to walk this path, and I won't be the last. But the same God who met them in their pain is the God who meets me in mine. So maybe you're wondering, how do I even move toward acceptance when I'm not ready? Well, here are 3 practices that have helped me. Number 1, name what you've lost. Write it down. Say it out loud. Be honest. Honesty is the doorway to acceptance. So number 1, name what you've lost. Number 2, notice the small shifts. Pay attention to those everyday signs that you're beginning to carry grief differently. And then number 3, invite God into it. Don't just try to grit your way forward. Ask Him to help you carry the weight. See, acceptance is less about arriving and more about slowly loosening your grip on what can't be changed. So, what does this mean for us? If you're in the middle of grief, maybe you've resisted the idea of acceptance. That's okay. It doesn't come all at once. But here are some reflection questions to sit with. Where have I noticed small glimpses of acceptance in my own grief? What might it look like to stop fighting reality and start making peace with it? Where do I sense God inviting me to trust Him with what I can't change? Here's a simple application. Write down one area where you feel God is bringing you toward acceptance. It could be as small as a daily rhythm or as big as a decision about your future. Just name it and ask God to meet you in it. Acceptance is not the end of grief. It's the beginning of healing. On this 1-year mark of Eryn's passing, I can tell you the pain is still real. I was crying earlier today, actually. Just remembering. So the pain is still real, but so is the hope. And in that tension, I'm learning to trust God more deeply. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who may be walking through grief. I hope that if you're walking through grief, you will reach out Get my free resource that I created, 7 Prayers for the Grieving Heart. You can get that at whitmancollective.com/grief. I would love for you to like and comment and subscribe to the podcast and do all those things. Those all really matter. Thank you again for joining me today on this really special episode. Remember, you don't have to carry grief alone. There is hope. There is healing. And with God, new life is always possible. See you next week.